Welcome to Pharmacy View, Technology and Pharmacy Business podcast series, where we provide regular interviews with pharmacists and key industry people within the Australian pharmacy and associated industry. In each podcast, we look to discuss aspects of pharmacy operation and how technology is improving or interacting with each guest's current role or pharmacy-related business. In this episode, we're talking with Roger Simpson from the Australian-based company, The Retail Solution. Welcome, Roger.
Thanks, Scott. Nice to be on board.
Fantastic. Roger, many listeners on here might already know you from the work that you've done within the Australian pharmacy industry. And I'm certainly very pleased to have been associated with some of the work that we've done together with Terry White and Pharmacy Alliance. But prior to what you've been doing today, who is Roger Simpson?
Sure. I guess from my point of view, Scott, that I've been in a training role now for more than 25 years and started my career with Shell in the corporate world and ended up getting into training it was a promotional move and thought I might be 2 or 3 years maximum, Scott. But as I said, that was 25 years ago. So I just found that training just suited my personality, and I love facilitating training courses. I love helping people improve their business, and it was just a natural to stay in the retail field, which I also love. So yeah, that's sort of my background.
Cool. And obviously at the moment based in Melbourne, but I would suggest, given your business, you travel around Australia a fair bit. You've had a bit of interaction around the countryside.
Yes, yeah. When we're allowed to travel, absolutely,
Yeah.
Scott. So yeah, and I've worked in pretty much every capital in Australia. Do a lot of work on the eastern seaboard in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, though, of course. But yeah, I've done a fair bit of pharmacy work with the Noel Allen Group in Adelaide for a number of years. So yeah, and familiar with quite a few different pharmacy groups.
Yeah. So Roger, on that basis, talk to me about some of the groups in Australian pharmacy that you've done work with.
Sure. So started off way back, probably I think probably 20 years ago. Scott was actually working with the Terry White Group originally, and then moved into doing some work with ChemMart, and then since the amalgamation with Terry White, the Terry White ChemMart Group, done a little bit of work with them, and done a lot of work in the last few years with Capital Chemists as well, the group based out of Canberra, and also some work with, as you already mentioned, sort of Pharmacy Alliance, and also the Instago Group in Pharmacy Fusion. So I work with quite a few sort of some of the larger groups, but also some of the smaller groups as well. So yeah, and all very interesting. And as you know, Scott, pharmacy is changing dramatically, like everything in retail is changing.
Absolutely. So, without breaking any confidentiality clauses, what's some of the work that you've done with some of the groups to help them with their brands and their teams?
Yeah, look, and very much about my simple focus is really about the people side. I don't dabble in merchandising or inventory or products, etc., or finance. I really hone in on the people side because I believe that's where any retailer and also pharmacy in particular, can make a massive difference with their customers, and I generally focus around the sales and service piece. And what I primarily do, of course, is work with retail manager pharmacy owners about how do they coach their team back on the job to ensure that they meet clear expectations of amazing customer service. And I also do a lot of work around the health solutions area as well, Scott, because I know that a lot of pharmacies, I think, miss a huge opportunity in educating their customers a lot more and that sort of overall health solution. So rather than just being a transactor where a customer will come in and actually just looking for something for hay fever, and we help them out, they need to have a bigger conversation around a little bit of cause and effect as well, and that might be some natural product that could help them with their overall health and well-being, keep them staying healthier and longer. So I think there's a huge opportunity in pharmacy to really focus on that.
On that, and look, certainly that's been a push for many years in terms of the way pharmacy teams interact with their customers that are coming in. So we've mentioned obviously a few of the groups that you've worked with, but do you also do work with independent pharmacy businesses?
Yes, I do. I've done in a couple of actually aspects, Scott. I've worked with a few pharmacies where I'll just actually go in and do a bit of staff training, but then also do some follow up with that sort of the leadership team. So I've I've done that from time to time, but I've particularly with a number of the capital chemist pharmacy owners and a Terry White pharmacy owner in Albury, is I've actually done a little bit around helping them with their vision and values. So just spending time with them, because it's about trying to get their leadership team on the same page about what do they actually want to be known for in their for their particular pharmacy, and because you've got to stand out for something, Scott. Otherwise you stand for nothing. So I've helped a number of these pharmacies just sort of help them craft their like an overall vision of where they want to be in 2, 3, or 4 years, and then helping them with a 90-day action plan. And that's been very interesting. Like I did a lot of work with Samantha Cordis from one of the capital chemist groups in Charnwood, and it was just really amazing the success she actually achieved, and not all down to me, obviously, but she'd done a lot of hard work, but it was just helping her just I guess get it out of the day to day in the business doing it to actually more working on the business, and she found that extremely helpful. So that's been a wonderful journey for me as well. So and I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah. So on that basis, if you had a pharmacist business owner listening today, what might be a couple of the key reasons that an independent pharmacist has contacted you or spoken to you about? Like what outcome are they looking forward to engage your services?
Yeah, so very much about getting their people aligned around, because I talk about when we talk about performance in store of their people. Number one, Scott, is that their team need to know the expectations. So whatever task they're doing, they need to know what the expectations are. What is good or what does great actually look like? If they don't understand that, then they can't do the job properly. So I use customer service around, well, what does great customer service look like? And once we set that expectation with the team members, some of them are going to need some training, because it might be some product knowledge training, or might be how to have that total health solution conversation. So we provide some training. That's step two. Step three is that the leadership team have to be role models, because if they can't lead by example, Scott, then the team's not going to follow. And then step four is that this is where a lot of retailers don't do this next two steps, is they just expect, because we've trained the team, they're going to be perfect from now on. But people need ongoing follow up, so they need to be evaluated. So their performance needs to be monitored, and that's not trying to look over their shoulder and every 5 seconds and try and look for mistakes. It's just evaluating them with a customer from time to time, and then based on that, you can give them feedback. And that feedback process needs to be ideally focused on catching them doing it right, because we know a lot of people do lots of great things. Unfortunately, leadership has often been focused around catching people doing things wrong, and that's really negative. I'm not saying that you ignore things when they're not being done correctly, but there's a way of actually giving them feedback as well that doesn't focus on you're wrong, you should be doing it better this way, because that language just doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I'm sure quite a few people listening today would agree with you there. So, Roger, thanks for that. I guess bit of a history and who you are and what you're doing. The brings us now, I guess, to why are we here to talk today, and that's around technology and pharmacy.
Yes.
So we spoke briefly at the beginning of this about the fact that we used to fly a lot around the countryside visiting pharmacies, but recent circumstances would certainly have stopped that.
Yes.
So I've no doubt that you've had some inclusion of technology in your business previously. But if you could talk to me about what technology for the retail solution looked like, in 2019, and what does it look like today?
Yes, yeah, and certainly you're right, Scott. It was we're very focused on face-to-face training, and that's obviously off the cards at the moment. And so what we've done as well is that morphing into actually providing some video training as well. So I can put together quite easily a specific set of videos that actually train the store leaders, but also frontline team members around those setting expectations. What are those expectations? How to delegate? How to follow up, etc. So that's again, where you need to. I can't get to people and so how do I get my message across? So we've just started to create that, and it's been really good. We've got some keen interest on that as well, and we're going to do some more work on that to really have that out there in a month or two in more detail. So yeah, that's definitely one thing that we're looking at, because, as you know, Scott, it's hard to get people out of any business now to attend training, and we've always really focused around, we don't really need to train the frontline people, but we absolutely need to train the store leaders, because they're the key ones to make sure they lead any change back in the pharmacy.
So, I guess to a point, an old adage comes up of training the trainer these days, with
Yes,
a nominated person within each pharmacy business takes on this mantle, but utilising the resources that you provide.
correct. That's exactly right, Scott. That's exactly it. Yep.
Okay, so I guess something too is I'm going to use a term here. Are you zoomed in or are you zoomed out? Because I know
Yes.
after several months of Zoom meetings, people become very tired of that. But are you using that kind of online conferencing for training as well, or are you looking at that?
Yes, yeah, to a certain degree, we are. I guess the challenge about Zoom, Scott, is you're right, is that is what I've found, and the feedback I've been getting from some of my clients is that, and particularly in a retail environment, it's very difficult to get people to actually go to an office or go to a quiet room and sit down for even half an hour to actually focus on a Zoom training call, because what invariably happens, they get interrupted, of course, and because someone wants to ask them a question or whatever. So that's why, when we did face-to-face training with the team leaders, getting them off site is always the best way to do it, because then you've got them in a conference room, etc. You can actually have them focus. So I've done a little bit of that, of some Zoom training, but it's unfortunately it's certainly a poor cousin to face training. So, and you're right. I mean, people are getting quite zoomed out. So I think we're certainly going to get ahead down that path of providing some video training. And again, we're looking at teaming up with a company that provides that access via phone, iPad, tablet, desktop, laptop, or whatever. So doesn't matter whether what particular piece of equipment the person's using, they can have access to the training, and because, as we know, people carry phones in their pockets, and much easier just to and if you keep the training short, so short little bites, around about that sort of 3 to 5 minute, it's much more palatable, and easier to retain information as well.
So I guess with your videos and online training, and you mentioned the fact that in the current model, the idea would be to have a leader within each business that becomes your point of contact or your
Yes.
point of training. What kind of follow up or closure on each kind of session would you then provide?
Yeah, and that would be, again, you can work with a team leader on a Zoom call as well, around obviously getting them to do the training, and then have a follow up process. Where you'd set them, okay, here's some goals for the first few weeks. Let's check back in a couple of weeks to see how you're going, etc. So, and that would be done via Zoom. So you're right, because people need some, and it needs support and follow up to make sure that they've got things going in the right direction.
Cool. And I guess just that as a bit of an industry discussion, Roger, you and I guess have been stuck at home in Victoria,
Yes.
and we've been seeing the news around retail and what may or may not happen to the future. What thoughts or advice or guidance have you got around what retail might look like, given, and we know that the pharmacy model sometimes gets bundled into retail
Yep.
and is a different model, particularly in the healthcare arrangement.
Hmm.
But pharmacists, business owners are going to see potentially disruption happening in retail in the next 6 to 12 months. What
Yes.
what likely impact is that going to have on pharmacy, do you think?
Yeah, and I think it's been interesting, Scott, because the rise of online shopping, and that's been, we've had online shopping for quite a few years now, but the, I guess, exponential growth that's occurred this year because of people being stuck at home is certainly a massive change. And that's brought forward the absolute need for every retailer, and this includes pharmacy in this, has to have a really good online presence, because customers will, because if they're stuck at home, and I think we've created a lot of habit now with people actually going, well, I can just I can shop online. It's much easier, and so they've got to have a platform where a customer can go onto their site really easily, and it's easy to navigate, and it's easy to ask questions if they need. So again, chatbots are really powerful here, or live chat, for example. And of course, then it's the ability to then decide on, well, I want to order and I want to pay online and I want to get a delivery, or I want to do a click and collect, or whatever it might be. So every retailer, and of course, what we're seeing now is that retailers that have done particularly well during the store closures are the ones that have had a good online presence. And so everything needs to be smooth. So shopping carts need to be smooth, all those sort of things. And then when you couple that with when we reopen again, and I know in the other states outside Victoria they are, but when there's the reopening, of course, and customers are coming back into store, that experience has to be really good as well. You can't have a really good online experience and a poor in-store experience, and vice versa. So you've got to have both of those aligned. And because these days, Scott, shoppers want to shop how they want to shop, when they want to shop, and on any particular format they want to shop on. So retailers have really got to get in the game. So technology is an absolute key here to make sure that they're well across that.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with that. So right now, if you're a pharmacy business that doesn't have some kind of online presence, be it, I guess, an e-commerce
Yep.
platform or even a social media platform, it'd be pretty important for them
Yep.
to look at that. And I certainly know there's a few pharmacy industry groups, associations, and contacts that are out there and happy to help with that as well. So I guess, Roger, on that note too, we've been limited. We're not allowed really to fly outside of Australia at the moment, and I know it's been a big history for Australians to be able to fly overseas, and we've interacted with customer service and culture standards in many other
Yes.
countries. We're really island bound for the next year at least, and possibly even a bit longer.
Yep.
You mentioned before about how important it is for the customer to get a good experience back in your pharmacy.
Yes.
So this is an area that you can work with pharmacies on. You mentioned earlier you specialise in customer service training.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely, and that's and again, what I see is that with pharmacy, it's just a huge opportunity to make it so each pharmacy needs to make it a destination for their customers. So when they come in, they are welcomed, etc. So and obviously that they are approached, and but then it's about having the conversation. It's not, as I said before, the one thing that I really can't stand is just being transacted. Is that because what we know as well, Scott, is that a lot of customers do research online beforehand. So that and they often they'll research a particular product which they think is right for them. And if they just come in and ask for that product and we just give it to them, then maybe it's not quite right for them. So Scott's going to dry throat. I'm going to have a quick drink of water.
You're right.
So that's the challenge about if they think the product's right for them and we just transact and provide that product to them, we're not providing the right service to them. So it's all about having that discovery conversation about what are they, again, particularly in pharmacy, it's around what symptoms do they present with, etc. And then we can
Yeah.
and it's about asking key questions there about like how long have you had it for, all the usual stuff we're really good at, but really listening to how they respond, and then we can go, here's a product that I would recommend that's going to help with your hay fever. Now you also
Yes.
mentioned that you've got itchy eyes or whatever, so this will help, but I'd also recommend this. So we're actually having a conversation that is going to provide that total solution to the customer. Now, the focus, and this is what I always talk about, Scott, the focus is not about trying to sell them the extra product. That's
Okay.
bonus.
Yes.
The conversation is about informing the customer. So our language needs to reflect that. And it's exactly the same at Scripts Out. Is that, as we know, most 70, 80% of sales are scripts.
Yes.
What conversations are we having with the customer about what other products or services that would complement what they're actually purchasing? And
Yeah.
it's about just informing the customer. And that's where I think if we can do that, if we can take the extra 20 seconds that it's going to take to have a conversation, Scott, it's not long. And
Yes.
we know every customer's not going to be open to that, and that's fine. You can certainly tell. But again, if we have that 20-second conversation, it's about informing the customer of some options. If they decide to buy, bonus for them, bonus for the pharmacist as well, or the pharmacy. If they don't decide to buy, they walk out knowing that, gee, they really care about my overall health and well-being. That
Yes.
will drive return customers.
So I guess my listening to you there, the customer service experience, if done properly, will win over any day the online shopping experience.
I believe so, Scott. Now, what we're going to see much more, of course, is a blend. There's going to
Yes,
be, we were tracking about 8 or 9% of online sales. It's now moved up to 11, and that's going to continue to grow quite dramatically. So I don't think we're going to get to the 50-50 in my lifetime, Scott. But you never know what's going to happen in the next couple of years with technology
that's true.
and
Yeah.
and technology. It's interesting about because when you think about what's the difference between an online purchasing online and purchasing in store. And because online now, they're doing everything they can to make it like a real environment. So they've got live chats. If you've got questions, you can actually talk to someone online. So they're almost doing, they've got that sort of process around. We can provide advice online. So why would someone want to walk into a pharmacy? But of course, it's about asking those key questions, etc., and making that customer feel really welcome. And obviously, they can't get scripts online at this stage as well, Scott. So they need to they
Yes.
need to come to a pharmacy. But those things could change over the next few years as well. Who knows? So there's a lot up for grabs, Scott.
That's it. So I guess the reciprocal from my point before then was that if you are a pharmacy business set up for online shopping,
Hmm.
then speed is also critical, and customer service of speed. So if you've got customers now talking to you through, it could be a Facebook page,
Yep,
it could be the online portal. The reality is that if the pharmacy team's not set up to respond to that fairly quickly, the customer will see that as poor customer service. Is that
absolutely.
correct?
Yep. And that's the I guess the battle's being played out now with online around speed of delivery. And
Yes.
what we're seeing now, of course, is that and in Canberra, the first trial of drone deliveries happened last year. So and,
Yes.
and, and that's a game changer when you've got drone deliveries, because obviously it's you can that's a very rapid response as well. So we just don't know where it's going to go, Scott, and what's going to happen in the next. I guess 5 years is a long time in retail, and it's a huge amount of time for technology. So it's going to be very, very interesting. So my advice would be for any pharmacist listening to this conversation today would be, make sure that you're well aware of what's happening around technology. Investigate what are the latest things that are happening. What are the leading edge pharmacy businesses actually doing around technology, and look to piggyback onto that.
Yeah, and look, I certainly as an example in my case, I've got two young adult children and a grandchild now, and I have regular conversations with them about, well, how are they shopping these
Mm,
days? How are they talking to people? How are they interacting with retailers? So that's often a good place to go. If I never ever assume,
no,
because we know what that does.
that's right.
That I know what's going on, but yeah, take every opportunity to talk to your team members and your team members' family as to how they're interacting online these days.
Absolutely, because I think some one of the challenges about the pharmacy industry is that they have often been a bit slow to change, and while that was okay 5-10 years ago, because you could just keep doing what you've always done. Now it's just way too competitive, and yeah, you've got to keep up with what's going on.
Yeah, I look, Roger. I was talking to another podcast guest earlier this week, and who'd spent some time in America, and this example, I guess, not frightened me, but just gave me an idea of what customer service in mainstream US looks like. Where he was at a party with some friends,
Hmm.
and during the barbecue, the host ordered something on his phone while he was barbecuing, and it was delivered before they left. So that in itself
Yep.
is a new era of retail, where you've got the confidence for that to actually happen. So
Absolutely.
uh, uh,
Yep, and also I think, Scott, as well. The one sort of elephant in the room we haven't really talked about is of course Amazon, and the disruption that Amazon has caused retailers is phenomenal. And while they've been slow to sort of get off the ground here, and they're just building exponentially and putting in new delivery facilities in Sydney, etc., and in warehousing across Australia. So they play the very long game. So we, beware the sleeping giant, as they say. So
As I say, well, look, it's interesting you raised that, and I didn't tell you who it was, but yes, the podcast recording I did earlier this week was with a pharmacist by the name of Tim Shelton from here in Victoria,
mm-hmm.
who currently works with brands and groups in engaging and working with the Amazon model. So
Yes,
there's another podcast to listen to fairly shortly.
yeah,
So
fantastic.
Roger, that's been great to chat with you. If anyone's listening, and how would they get in contact with you if they're interested in chatting with you a bit further?
Yeah, no worries at all. My website is theretailsolution.com.au. So they can obviously jump on that and contact me through that as well. I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free for anyone to connect with me on LinkedIn would be great. Yeah, so those two ways, Scott, best way to get hold of me.
That's good. All right, and we'll make sure that we include those links in the podcast
No
page.
worries.
Roger, it's been a pleasure to chat with you again. I know we haven't seen each other for some time, and it might
Yes,
be a while before we're let out again because we've got this barrier called Melbourne Metro in between
yes,
us. But
exactly.
I really thank you for your time
No,
today and chat. I certainly have highlighted some things to me in terms of what technology and the change in isolation and online deliveries and how important customer service is both online and in your pharmacy. So I really thank you for your time today, Roger.
absolute pleasure, Scott. Thank you for getting me on.